The Beverly Hills Hotel press room was on the ground floor behind the Polo Lounge, a windowless space with folding chairs arranged in rows, and a podium with microphones that picked up every cough and whisper. And at 10:47 a.m. on a Friday in June 1957, Frank Sinatra sat at a table facing 43 journalists who'd been waiting for 20 minutes and were getting impatient in that particular way, that people who work on deadlines get impatient when their time is being wasted. The room smelled like coffee and cigarette smoke, and the kind of sweat that comes from sitting in a space with no air circulation while wearing suits in California summer heat. And the overhead lights made everyone look tired and slightly yellow, like they were all recovering from the same illness. George Evans stood near the back wall, arms crossed, watching everything, 52 years old, silver temples, Sinatra's publicist for 11 years, a man who'd managed crises and manufactured stories, and understood that public relations was the art of controlling what people thought they knew. Next to him stood Alan Morris from Capitol Records, 38 years old, nervous energy, checking his watch every 90 seconds, here to make sure Sinatra promoted the new album, Come Fly With Me, which had just been released and was already selling better than anything Sinatra had done in 5 years. At the table with Sinatra sat Hank Santacola, Sinatra's manager, 49 years old, pocket square, reading glasses, a man who'd been with Sinatra since the beginning and knew exactly when to speak and when to stay quiet. The press conference had been scheduled for 10:30 a.m., but Sinatra had arrived late, 17 minutes late, and hadn't apologized, had just sat down and nodded at Evans to begin. Evans stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Mr. Sinatra will make a brief statement about his new album and then take questions. Frank." Sinatra leaned toward the microphones. "The new album is called Come Fly With Me. It's travel songs, good songs. Nelson Riddle arranged them. Billy May conducted. Capitol released it last week. You should buy it." He leaned back. That was the statement. 47 seconds. The journalists looked at each other, waiting for more. Nothing came. A reporter in the front row, Stan Levine from the Los Angeles Times, raised his hand. Evans pointed at him. "Stan, Frank, the album is getting good reviews. Critics are saying this is your best work since the comeback. Do you feel like you're finally back on top?" Sinatra looked at him. "I never left, but your career went through a difficult period. The divorce, the dropped contracts, the public perception that you were finished. Does this album feel like vindication?" "It feels like an album. But surely you're pleased that people are responding positively after such a rough few years." "I'm pleased that the music is good. What people think about my personal life doesn't concern me." A woman in the third row, Patricia Harding from Variety, spoke without being called on. "Frank, speaking of your personal life, there are rumors you're seeing someone new. Can you confirm?" No, you can't confirm, or no, you're not seeing anyone. No, I'm not discussing it. The public is interested in gossip. I'm here to talk about music." Another reporter jumped in, Marcus Webb from the New York Herald Tribune. "Frank, let's talk about the music then. Several songs on the album have exotic locations: Brazil, Peru, India. Have you actually been to these places?" "Some of them." "Which ones?" "The ones I've been to." That's not much of an answer. It's the answer to your question. The room was getting tense. Evans could feel it. These journalists had come expecting the charming Sinatra, the quotable Sinatra, the Sinatra who gave them material for their columns. Instead, they were getting minimal responses and no enthusiasm. Evans stepped forward. "Let's keep the questions focused on the album, please." A reporter in the back, Thomas Ridley from the Chicago Tribune, stood up. "Frank, the album is being marketed as a return to form, but some critics are saying you're just repeating what worked before. Swing arrangements, Billy May conducting, the same formula you've used for years. Is there any truth to that?" Sinatra looked at him for a long moment. "The formula works, but doesn't that feel safe, predictable, like you're not taking any risks?" "Making good music isn't about taking risks, it's about serving the songs. But artists are supposed to evolve, to push boundaries. You're doing the same thing you did in 1954. If it was good in 1954, why shouldn't it be good in 1957? Because audiences expect growth. They expect you to challenge yourself." Sinatra sat back in his chair. "Next question." Another reporter, Susan Chen from Billboard, raised her hand. Frank, there's a perception that you've become difficult to work with. Directors, producers, musicians, many of them say working with you is challenging because you're controlling and demanding. How do you respond to that? I don't. You don't respond to the criticism. I don't respond to gossip dressed up as journalism. These are industry professionals making these statements. Then they can make them to me directly instead of to you. The temperature in the room dropped. Alan Morris from Capitol looked like he wanted to stop the press conference. Evans looked like he was calculating how to salvage it. Santa Cola just watched Sinatra, waiting. Stan Levine tried to get things back on track. Frank, let's talk about the success of From Here to Eternity. You won an Oscar 4 years ago. Since then, you've had hit records, successful films, a major comeback. How does it feel to be back on top after everyone counted you out? Sinatra looked at him. They didn't count me out. They counted me down. There's a difference. What's the difference? Counting out means you're finished. Counting down means people stop paying attention. I never stopped working. I never stopped being good. People just stopped noticing for a while. So you're saying the comeback wasn't real. I'm saying I never went away. Patricia Harding jumped back in. Frank, you keep deflecting questions about your personal struggles, but those struggles are part of your story, part of what makes your comeback meaningful. Why won't you talk about them? Because they're personal. That's what personal means. Not public, but you're a public figure. Your fans want to know. My fans want to hear me sing. What they think they want to know about my personal life is none of their business. Marcus Webb stood up again. Frank, with all respect, you're being evasive. We're here to write about you, to tell your story, and you're giving us nothing. I'm giving you an album, that's the story. An album isn't a story, it's a product. Sinatra looked at him. Then write about the product. Our readers want more than that. They want context, background, the human element. Then write about different human elements. Write about Nelson Riddle's arrangements. Write about Billy Mays conducting. Write about the musicians who played on the record. Write about anyone except me. But you're Frank Sinatra, you're the story. I'm the singer, the songs are the story. Thomas Ridley spoke up again. Frank, you're making this very difficult. We're trying to do our jobs. We're trying to give you publicity for your album. And you're acting like we're bothering you. You are bothering me. The room went silent. Ridley's face went red. Excuse me. I said you're bothering me. You're asking questions about my personal life instead of my work. You're looking for gossip instead of journalism. You're trying to turn my album release into a soap opera about my struggles and my comeback and my redemption. And I'm not interested in participating in that. Then why are you here? Good question. Sinatra stood up. Evans stepped forward quickly. Frank, we have 15 more minutes scheduled. We're done. But the album needs publicity. We have journalists from major markets here. This is important for sales. Then you talk to them. Tell them about the album. I'm leaving. Susan Chen stood up. Mr. Sinatra, if you walk out of this press conference, we'll write about that. We'll write that you were difficult, evasive, hostile to the press. Is that what you want? Sinatra looked at her. Write whatever you want, you will anyway. He walked toward the door. Hank Santacola grabbed his briefcase and followed. Stan Levine called out, Frank, one more question. Do you have any regrets about your career? Any decisions you'd change if you could go back? Sinatra stopped at the door, didn't turn around. I regret doing press conferences. He left. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. The journalist sat in stunned silence for maybe 5 seconds. Then the room erupted. Everyone talking at once, comparing notes, deciding how to write this, what angle to take. George Evans stood at the front of the room, trying to do damage control, explaining that Sinatra had been under tremendous pressure, that he was tired, that he meant no disrespect. Alan Morris from Capitol looked like he might be sick. The press conference had lasted 14 minutes. Frank Sinatra had answered 11 questions with varying degrees of non-cooperation and walked out before anyone could ask about tour dates, future projects, or anything else that might actually sell records. The Los Angeles Times ran the story the next morning. Sinatra storms out of press conference. The Variety headline read, All Blue Eyes gives press the cold shoulder. The Herald Tribune went with, Difficult Sinatra refuses to play nice with journalists. Every article mentioned his evasiveness, his hostility, his refusal to discuss anything meaningful. Every article speculated about why he was so defensive. what he was hiding, whether success had made him arrogant. And every article mentioned the name of the album, Come Fly With Me. The album sold 300,000 copies in the first month. By the end of the year, it had moved over 1 million. It stayed on the charts for 86 weeks, became one of the best-selling albums of Sinatra's career, and won a Grammy nomination. The press conference that was supposed to promote it became a footnote, because here's what the journalists didn't understand. Frank Sinatra didn't need them to like him. He needed them to write about him. Whether they wrote positive or negative didn't matter as long as they spelled the album title correctly. George Evans resigned as Sinatra's publicist 3 months later, not because of the press conference, because he realized after 11 years that he was trying to manage someone who didn't want to be managed. He told a colleague, Frank doesn't do public relations. He does public honesty. And honesty is terrible for public relations, but it works for him. I don't know how, but it works. Alan Morris from Capitol Records learned to stop scheduling press conferences. He'd send Sinatra to perform on television, on radio, anywhere the music could speak for itself. And sales stayed strong. We kept trying to make Frank sell the albums, Morris said in 1983. Then we realized the albums sold themselves. Frank just had to exist. That was enough. Hank Sanacola managed Sinatra for another 6 years, through a dozen more confrontations with press executives, directors, anyone who thought they could control him. He never tried to explain Sinatra's behavior, just accepted it. Frank treated everyone the same, Sanacola said. Presidents, journalists, studio heads, waiters. If you respected him, he respected you. If you wanted something from him he didn't want to give, he said no. Didn't matter who you were. Didn't matter what it cost him. That's not difficult. That's consistent. Stan Levine from The Times covered Sinatra for another 20 years. He never forgot the Beverly Hills Hotel press room. He wrote about it in his memoir in 1989. We thought we were entitled to Sinatra's story, his struggles, his comeback, his personal life. We thought because he was famous he owed us access. And he looked at us like we were crazy. Like fame was about the work, not the person. Like we should care about the album, not the gossip. He was right. We were wrong. But we didn't figure that out until years later. The Beverly Hills Hotel press room is still there, ground floor. Same folding chairs, same podium, same lack of windows. Different press conferences now, different celebrities, different albums being promoted. But the dynamic is the same. Journalists asking questions, publicists managing responses, artists trying to figure out how much of themselves to sell. Most artists sell everything. Give the journalists what they want. Answer every question. Play the game. Smile for the cameras. Pretend their personal lives are public property. A few don't. A few draw a line between the work and the person. Between what they'll discuss and what they'll protect. Between what's for sale and what isn't. Frank Sinatra drew that line in a press room in Beverly Hills in 1957 and walked away from journalists who thought they were owed more than he was willing to give. And 43 journalists wrote articles calling him difficult, defensive, hostile to the press. And millions of people read those articles and saw the album title Come Fly With Me and went out and bought it. Because Frank Sinatra understood something about publicity that publicists never understand. The worst publicity is being ignored, and the best publicity is being talked about, even when people are criticizing you, as long as they're spelling your name right, as long as they're mentioning your work, as long as they're paying attention. The rest is just noise. Would you have stayed in that press room? Would you have answered the questions about your personal life, played the game, given the journalists what they wanted so they'd write positive stories and help sell your album? Or would you have stood up at 10:47 a.m. and walked out knowing 43 people would call you difficult in print, knowing your publicist would be furious, knowing the smart move was to smile and cooperate, and the honest move was to protect what wasn't theirs to ask about?